Good afternoon. First of all, I welcome all of you in today's webinar. First of all, I welcome CA Dheeraj Khandelwal ji, Chairman, Committee of MSME ICI, CA Pramod Jain ji, Vice Chairman, Committee of MSI in absentia, and guest speaker of today's webinar, CA Advocate Nipun Singhvi ji. Welcome, sir. Sandeep ji, Chairman Ahmednagar branch, CA Rajendra ji, Chairman Nashik branch, Chairperson Solapur branch, CA Nilesh ji, Madam. I welcome all. I hand over mic to the CA Sandeep ji for introduction session of CA Dheeraj Khandelwal ji. Sandeep ji, over to you, sir.
Thank you, Yogesh ji. Very first, thank you for the Committee on MSME and Startup for arranging such a wonderful session. And today it is my immense pleasure to introduce our own Dheeraj Bhai, Central Council member, Dheeraj ji Khandelwal, Chairman of this MSME and Startup. See, Dheeraj Khandelwal has proved his milestone at various professional and social platforms. Very first, he's a member of Central Council of ICI in 2 consecutive terms from 2016-19 and current term 19-22. Chairman of Committee on Public and Government Financial Management 21-22. Vice Chairman of Committee for Development of International Trade Services and WTO. Vice Chairman Valuation Standard Board. He was the Chairman of Banking, Financial Services, Insurance Committee in 2019-20 and Committee on Public Finance and Accounting Standards for Local Bodies 2019-20. He was Chairman of Committee for Professional Accountants in Business and Industry 18-19, Convener of Career Counseling Group of ICI 2017-18, Vice Chairman of Board of Studies and Committee on Management Accounting 16-17. He was a member of WRC for 3 consecutive terms 2007-10, 10-13 and 13-16. He initiated first CA Leader Awards, CSR Awards in 2015 and organized event recognition of CAs in social service and organized campaign on Azad Bharat, Swachh Bharat. He was the secretary of WRC in 2008-9 and he was the first and the only recipient of Excellent Performance Individual Award in 2008 as WRC secretary. He was the chairman of Vikasa in 2009-10 and chairman of committee of Azad Bharat, Swachh Bharat of WRC in 2015-16. He was the chairman of Career Counseling Committee in 2010-11, chairman of Internal Audit Committee in 2011-12, project convener, recognition of CS in Social Services 2015. He is author of CSR Handbook, Handbook on Green Audit, articles on various professional opportunities, served as independent director on the boards of Edelweiss Financial Advisors Limited. Socially, he is also very much active and he was the president of Lions Club of Mumbai Western in 2004-5. He was a zonal chairman of Lions Club International 2005-6. He was a vice president of Rajasthani Seva Sangha, life member of Rajasthan Vidyarthi Graha. He has wide experience in practice for nearly 18 years and have excelled in driving client relationships. He is also specialized in the field of audit, business, advisory and planning and company law matters and also been involved in offering advisory services on accounting system, accounting principles, etc. and their conformity with Indian and international accounting standard. He is also having specialization in the field of project finance, FEMA, cross-border transaction, direct indirect tax, consultancy and all legal matters. His clientele include large corporations including MNCs, owner-managed companies, service businessmen and professionals. These are the professional achievements, and apart from this, let me add from my side that since 15 years I'm associated with Dheeraj Bhai. And Dheeraj Bhai is the person who very first took me on the Administration Coordination Committee in 2007 of WRC. Because of only him, I served 3 committees. And I knew that whenever I'm much associated with the students and whenever there's a problem related to student, I knew that if an issue is put before the Dheeraj Bhai, it will be resolved within 24 hours. So man of members as well as man of students. Sir,
thank you. Thank you. I think you are very close to me, and I always say that you are my younger brother, and always seen you like serving to the members and the students, always working. So, my good friend, my younger brother Sandeep Desada, another young dynamic person from Nasik, very humble, very smart, and always dedicated for the all work is Sohail Sir. And again, my good friend Paresh Bora and Darakji, and the chairperson from Solapur, again, the person who corrected me in 2007 to 6 to 9, Neeraj Nogja. So his wife Nilasa now is there as a chairperson of the Solapur branch. And again, I met a very young, dynamic person from in the Panipat, where in the short notice, within a day, he organized the interaction meeting with the industry association, and where the cluster development is coming, where he always took for the MSME to take care of it, where he started MSME help desk. Very excellent and very dynamic person from the Panipat is Yogesh Goyal, and my all people over here, and again a very dynamic professional advocate, chartered accountant Nipun Singh Biji, who going to deliver his talk on the pre-package package insolvency. So, friend, I think today again is a milestone day for the MSME sectors and committee as well as the profession. The reason being that this subject is chosen, it's also very important for the MSME. Without this, it can't be completed. And when we started our journey in the MSME, because this is the first year of this, committee, and we founded foundation year of this committee, where we thought that let's have the separate wing in the institute to promote the MSME, to guide the MSME, to have a national building arm for the MSME, national building in the MSME. Because when we are handling students, when we are handling members, why not strengthen the economy when the government expect $3 trillion to $5 trillion economy. So because of that $3 to $5 trillion economy, we chartered accountant can play important, and the important role of the economy going to play by the MSME. The reason being that as of now, the MSME are playing a important role. Right now, we can say the MSME plays near about 30% contribution to the GDP, and the world benchmark is about 60%. And the government thought it, let's increase this ratio in the near term, immediate term, is to 40% contribution. And when I am saying that after a disasters and this pandemic, we have seen a lot of things are happening, a lot of change. And the current topic also, we have seen this IBC came in 2016, 4 years already being on. We have seen a lot of notifications, a lot of circulars, a lot of issues we've seen, and this pandemic also seen various issues to handle it longer time. A lot of things are there. So here is point is that we have to cater each and everything, especially for the MSME. We have had various program on the export incentives, export benefit for the MSME. We had subsidies for the MSMEs, various sector basis schemes, central government schemes. We have project finance. We have financial inclusion. We have government finance position, private equities. We have various others related MSME, like we are in the Uddamis Utsahayata, where the chartered accountant can play important role, where we can collect the money in the IBC. Generally, we took the tool to recover the money. Most of the cases are filed by the debt creditors are in the range of we have to recover the money from our client. Then money is recovered. A lot of resolution being taken care of it. Now, same way, it's a Uddami Sahayata for the MSME. Within 45 days, you can file the complaint, and within a year, you will file make the payment. You get the payment because civil code is not going to solve. So in each and every sector, we have worked and we have programmed live webinar, and it's a good opportunity for the professional. Let's start rather than having a compliance job. Let's take a front seat role and start working in this area and guide to the all members. And today also in another program where the pre-package schemes for the insolvency professional been announced in this month of April. And there's a very simple process, a special package for MSME. how, because in the pandemic, we removed 10 lakh scheme to 1 crore rupees. So where the MSMEs resolution or people going to be there. And in the earlier insolvency, it take time to 70 or 90 days. How it can be completed in 120 days. So now sort of period is being announced, sort of schemes are announced. Various schemes a professional can play important role. This is a area. And I feel that Nipun Singhvi ji is a expert in this area, and he will tell us, how to guide to our MSME industries, how it can be take help, because it's like a hand-holding exercise. Because of the previously, it's litigations is going on now with the hand glove with the MSME. They can save, they can work out resolution plan, they can be worked around. So I think this is the one of the excellent scheme where our professional people can important play, and the people from the Solapur, Panipat, Ichal, Ahmednagar, Nasik, and other areas, so they can figure out properly how the small chartered accountant working in this area can play important role. So with this, I think I'm great having this topic, one of the prominent topic, and feel that all professionals will work around that. And not only this, as a insolvency, there may be another area. We have started a certificate course. Third batch is going to live on 21st of August, fourth batch on 28th of August, and we are starting a startup arena also, where we going to launch our incubation center. We're going to our web portal. We are going to launch complete certificate course on this area, startup. Everything's for the startups is coming. So it's a great going to access. So let's members to take the new area of the opportunities. Look beyond that. Whatever the currently we are working with, the this new pandemic has taught us a lot of things. Now we have to see that the other things are moving around from a lot of because of the cut sort of the GST audit and all. So a lot of things are going away from us. We have to figure out new things, and I think this is the area where the chartered accountant has to look now about the practice avenue in the MSME. So with this, I'll feel that great learning to all of you in this by the Nipun Singhvi. I hope you will be complete after this session. We will start working in this area. So go ahead, and now I request my team leaders to introduce the Nipun Singhvi ji, so that he can the people of the fraternity will aware of how the Nipun Singhvi ji and how it can be helped. So over to the team. So now Sohail, please introduce. Yeah, please introduce the Nipun Singhvi ji. I think there's some error.
No, sir, he is mute.
Sohail, I think he's taking some time. Anyway, he will introduce later on. I request Nipun ji, please start, and then we'll introduce the others. Request him to later on.
Thank you, Dheeraj ji. And thank you all the office bearers of the branch and SME committee for choosing this topic, because I think this is a very important and a very hot topic today, because after almost 5 years when this law was born, they have now focused it on MSME, which is the biggest enterprise area which are reeling under this pandemic, or I would say there is a huge amount of default and they actually don't know how to come out of it. And this will, I tell you, after the completion of the presentation, probably you would now think that going for OTS or settlement with the bank is now organized and in a way legalized by the introduction of MSME pre-pack insolvency. So that is how this law has actually carved out a special procedure for MSME. And the wonderful thing about this is, though I was...
Before that, I think, Sohail, are you there? Sohail, can you reach out to us?
There was some issue in my network.
Yeah, please introduce the Nipulji.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So I'm extremely sorry for the network issue. So it's my privilege to introduce Nipun Singhvi sir. He's a practicing advocate, FCA, CS, LLB, LLM, certified forensic IFRS bank auditor, qualified independent director, Ministry of Corporate Affairs, executive program of merger and acquisition, IIM Ahmedabad. He have been member of World Bank Insolvency Group on Train the Trainers jointly with IBPI and IPA of all the three institutes of ICAI, ICSI, ICMAI. It's a part of various committees of ICAI on corporate laws, bank audit, accounting standards. He is a contributor to WIRC reference manual on insolvency laws for the year 2020-2021. He is a guide to IBC by Bloomsbury. He has delivered more than 1,500 lectures on various laws and across 50 cities. He is regular faculty at ICAI, ICSI, nationalized banks, CNAG, trade associations, etc., and regular author of various corporate and tax journals, majorly in Taxman, Corporate Professional, Today, Economic Times, Dainik Bhaskar. He is expert on corporate, commercial, and insolvency laws and advise and handle insolvency cases that worth more than rupees 1 lakh crores, and important cases includes JP Infratech, Lanco Infra, SR Steel, Reliance Naval and Engineering Limited, Gujarat Ambuja Exports Limited, etc. As a financial activist, he has filed numerous PIL in public interest. Some significant includes demonetization, budget 2017, tribunal members appointment, NCLT composition 2018, advance authority ruling, and national GST tribunal constitution, Indo-Korean steel custom duty evasion issue, extension of IT returns due date, extension of CFFS scheme due dates, Indian bank audit allotment. As a social activist representing in PIL on social cause, unfortunate Surat fire incident 2019, removal of caste in OBC list and formation of permanent commission, parking fee charged illegally, food price to be allowed in multiplexes, formation of policies in towing of vehicles, RERA appellate tribunal, appointment of technical members and permanent tribunal, coronavirus deferment of hearing before RERA and tribunal, COVID relaxation to builders, waiver of school fee during COVID in Gujarat, RERA tribunal formation Rajasthan, physical hearing in RERA and tribunal, cancellation of class 10 exam. As a RTI activist, disclosure of willful defaulters by SBI for the first time, RERA tribunal appointment, NCLT members appointment without approval of law ministry, listed PSU appointments of independent directors, unearthing crores of penalties, best penalty paid to BSE NSE, merger of Lakshmi Vilas Bank with DPS. So with this brief introduction, I request Advocate CA Nipun Singhvi sir.
Yes, welcome Nipun, welcome.
Welcome Nipun sir.
Thank you Sohail bhai, thank you Dheeraj ji, thank you all the office bearers. And I think it went too high. I'm humbled by my own profile. Thank you so much. And it's my pleasure that since I was part of this law-making process and now introducing a new provision that's MSME in the law is very near to my heart. I've been working on IBC right from the time when it was not even a law. When we had been assisting the parliamentary committee and we were giving our inputs, we were never thought that it would also apply to small enterprises. But the way it worked out, because when this law came, it was 6 lakh crores of NPA at that point of time. And almost 50% of it is resolved as per the latest data in a period less than that of 4 years. And this has worked wonderfully. And I hope that this will work also for MSME. As of now, though the law has only been notified for MSME corporates, it is yet to be notified for non-corporates. But the way things have been working, I am sure that this is going to bring a new boost up. In fact, I will also say that it is also an alternative to OTS schemes and settlement proposals, which otherwise are going back and forth with the banks, because banks were not able to take a clear view whether settlement could be done, what would be the policy of taking a haircut, what should be the relaxation given because of these COVID issues and all. But I think this law would definitely be a milestone as far as Indian laws are concerned, because this procedure stops all other litigations against the company and gives a handholding to the MSME to come out of these turbulent times. So with this background, I would now just start my presentation. So sir, are you able to see my slides, Dheeraj sir?
I think
Yes,
yes,
yes.
now it's fine. Yes,
Okay.
Yes.
So I am starting with the brief new concepts which have been introduced for pre-pack insolvency. I am presuming that our participants are aware about little bit about the normal insolvency. So when I'm saying normal insolvency, I am referring to corporate insolvency resolution process, CIRP. This pre-pack insolvency process, I would refer to it as PIRP. So basically, pre-pack insolvency is a special scheme, and normal insolvency, as we all are aware, have been into place for more than 4 years now. Though I would like to differentiate it as and when the new concepts I am discussing. But the normal insolvency now, because of the pandemic and various other issues, legislature thought it fit to increase the minimum default from 1 lakh to 1 crore. So basically, during the period of 24th March 2020 till 24th March 21, this whole 1 year, there was a suspension of insolvency code. And parallelly, government also increased the minimum default amount of 1 lakh to 1 crore. So that amount which was increased from 1 lakh to 1 crore actually left many of the corporates no option to go under IBC. Because on one hand, the COVID issue, there was suspension, and on the other hand, there was an increase in the limit. So the corporates which were having less amount in default could not actually go out or could not resolve. And as we all know, under IBC, I always give an example of a bad water, or I would say an impure water. We put it in RO and get a clean water to drink. So the same concept is of IBC. If there are various litigation, huge demands, maybe tax demands, maybe other litigations, you put it under IBC and you will get a clean company. Supreme Court also has recently deliberated upon this concept, and we call it clean slate theory. So all the things which are litigation, maybe contingent liability, maybe a healthy company going under insolvency would become a better and a healthier company, because there would be some litigation which might get crystallized when it goes through the courts. So I'm starting with some of the new concepts under pre-pack, and then I would take you through the process, how pre-pack works. And there is a new concept here, that the person who triggers insolvency. So pre-pack basically would be triggered by the entrepreneurs, by the promoters. So promoters would trigger insolvency, declaring their company as insolvent, because they will have a right, they will have a first right to give a plan to revive the company. So that is the most interesting part. I myself, if I am a promoter, in declaring that the company is insolvent. Why I am declaring the company as insolvent? Because I am aware that I would be able to revive the company by giving a resolution plan. And that's the finest difference between normal insolvency and pre-pack, that I already have a plan to revive the company. And what I am going to sacrifice, what I'm asking the creditors to sacrifice, would be a direct sacrifice by the financial creditors. To put it very crudely, I am asking banks to give a haircut, to give a relaxation, maybe a restructuring, maybe a reschedulement, maybe waiver on interest, maybe waiver on principal, through a legalized process where it would be judicially stamped by NCLT. So that is the whole concept, how pre-pack insolvency spans out. So there are some new definitions which have been introduced in the IB code. There is some eligibility conditions which we need to consider. So I will take you through all these conditions, situations. What is the preparatory work which we should do before advising an MSME to go for insolvency? So what should be the preparatory role? So it's like before filing of an income tax return, just like we ask the clients to get all these datas, maybe his deductions, insurance deductions, TDS returns, TDS forms, all those things which we call preparatory study, similarly would be a preparation for taking a company into pre-pack. And that preparation is again a time-bound situation where the company takes a conscious call and there is only a 90 days period to file an application under pre-pack. So if today I take a call as a company's management to take the company into pre-pack, within 90 days, I have to put in all papers and file an application with the NCLT. Why NCLT? Because only corporates are permitted now to go under pre-pack. As of now, partnership firms and non-corporate entities, maybe proprietors, are not permitted. As of now, only corporate side has been notified, but in times to come, I am sure that other non-corporates would also come in. I would also request Dheeraj ji to take up this with the government, because MSME other than corporates are also there, which requires this type of oxygen to revive. Then what should be the main ingredients for filing an application? So there is a format. So it's an easy thing. It's nothing very technical that only a lawyer can do it. We as a chartered accountant can very well file an application for pre-pack insolvency. What would be our role? Pre-filing of application, post-filing of application, then admitting the application, and then actually getting the resolution done. There is also a concept called vesting of management. So vesting of management, we all are aware, once the company goes under insolvency, the directors of the company becomes ex officio, or I would say the powers of the board of director become suspended. But in MSME, they have carved out an exception and the management will continue with the existing promoters. So this is a very important thing, and why this situation has come into this particular pre-pack scheme. The reason is they think that promoters are the best judges to take care of the company. It is because of XYZ reasons, maybe economic depression, maybe business not working well due to pandemic or any other situation. The businesses can be revived by the promoters themselves. So here the faith and trust in promoters is not lost. And that is a very welcome step, because in normal insolvency, a CIRP, the concept is that the promoters are suspended from their powers because it is assumed that they are not capable of running the company. Here it is absolutely reverse. And the another important feature for MSME is it will continue to be with them. So it is a concept called debtors in possession. So when the promoters are in possession, we call it debtors in possession. It's not a creditor in possession model. Normal insolvency is absolutely creditors in possession. That means bankers take the front seat and they give directions to the insolvency professional to steer the process. Here it is absolutely reverse. Promoters are continuing the company, they are taking decisions, and only for some material decisions they need to take it to committee of creditors. But if somebody is doing it mala fideli, somebody is trying to defraud the creditors, then in that case also committee of creditors can intervene and ask NCLT to give the power of management to insolvency professional and not permit the promoters. So I would say there is a check and balance in the law. If the promoters are ingenuine, promoters are doing it with the intention to defraud, definitely the powers of the promoters would be taken away. But that is an exceptional situation. The law presumes them to be correct, to be genuine, and proceed accordingly. Thereafter, there's a concept of approval of resolution plan, which is there in normal insolvency also. But here there is a catch. The catch is in pre-pack insolvency, the base resolution plan is given by the promoters. So the base resolution plan means just like we have in an auction, the basic reserved price, that if I am selling my house, the basic reserve price would be, let's say, 1 CR. So that is the minimum price I want my house to get sold. So just like that, when the company is going for pre-pack insolvency, promoters are aware that this is the basic minimum price I will have to offer to the creditors, and this is called BRP or base resolution plan. How does this base resolution plan gets negotiated, and even a third party can come and buy MSME under insolvency? That we are going to discuss, and it's very interesting how this dynamic bidding process will take place, but that we will discuss later on in our presentation. Another concept is, if it does not work out, there is no issue. The insolvency process of pre-pack can be terminated. So it can be terminated, but there was no such concept under normal CIRP. Under normal CIRP, there were only two concepts. Either the company would revive or go under liquidation. But under pre-pack, they are saying that if the negotiation does not work out, company will be back to normal and the pre-pack insolvency process would be terminated. So there is no as such dispute or difference, or I would say a pitfall is not there, even if things does not work out, does not get negotiated in the committee. Then there is liquidation of corporate debtor. So again, this is an exceptional situation. We will discuss all the situation, how liquidation of corporate debtor, liquidation of MSME would happen in exceptional cases only. So normal situation, either the plan would get approved or the process would get terminated. But in some exceptional situation, it could be liquidated. So this liquidation step is something which is exceptional. We will discuss some situation, 3 situations where it can be liquidated. Last and the most interesting part is in pre-pack, as Dheeraj bhai said, we have 120 days as the maximum time limit to come out of pre-pack insolvency process. So either we would get resolved or we would get terminated the process and come back to normal. But if the committee of creditors, now committee of creditors means the bankers who are not related party of the corporate debtor. So the bankers, if they decide that no, this particular company cannot get resolved or the plan is not viable and the company is fit to be taken under normal insolvency, then they will pass a resolution with a majority of 66% and migrate the company into normal corporate insolvency resolution process. So in short, it is normal CIRP. So what will happen in normal CIRP? 120 days of pre-pack and then 180 days of CIRP. So broadly speaking, there could be a situation where it is forced under normal insolvency. So pre-pack is something whereby an option is given to the MSME to negotiate, revive, bring a resolution plan. But if they are not able, the promoters are not able to convince the bankers, then this will go under normal CIRP and probably it will again get resolved if somebody else is coming to buy the company or the company may get liquidated. So there could be a risk and therefore it has to be a conscious call whether to take the company under normal CIRP or not, because it could be a situation where you yourself have initiated, the promoter itself has initiated insolvency and the negotiation do not work out. So there could be a situation like this. So we have to be very cautious while advising our client in case he is an MSME or while taking a call that whether financial creditors, like we could be also an advisor to a banker, whether he should accept the pre-pack insolvency initiation or not. Because without the consent of the bankers, pre-pack application cannot be filed. So that is a precondition. We will discuss the precondition, but broadly speaking, without the consent, pre-pack cannot be initiated. Without the consent, pre-pack cannot be resolved. Without the consent, company cannot continue to become normal. It might get liquidated. So the first concept under pre-pack, which I think is new, which I think is very much important for everybody to know, is the base resolution plan. So as I told you, base resolution plan is something like a basic reserve price at which I want to sell a particular asset. So base resolution plan is a plan under which the promoter would be offering the minimum payment to all the stakeholders. According to his understanding, let's say if I have a debt of maybe a debt of 100 rupees, and as per my understanding, all the stakeholders, I can at the best pay 60 rupees. So I would request a 40 rupees haircut. So that is basically the 60 rupees plan is the base resolution plan, which I may be required to put it before the committee of creditors. So base resolution plan is a plan which would give the minimum payments, and obviously it could be revised upwards. It cannot be revised downwards. Please read it cautiously. You can upward revise it. So if I'm starting with a resolution plan of 60 rupees, I can upward revise it to 65, 70, but I cannot reduce it to 50. If I am the promoter of the corporate debtor who has initiated insolvency. Second issue is preliminary information memorandum. So when the company is being taken over by the insolvency professional, he is required to make an information memorandum whereby details of assets, liabilities, litigations, or all these things are given under information memorandum. Here they've introduced a new concept called preliminary information memorandum. Now, what is preliminary information memorandum? It is the same information memorandum which was made by the RP, but here the same is prepared by the promoters. So therefore, preliminary information memorandum was prepared by promoters beforehand, and it is given to the RP who is appointed. So therefore, the preparation of resolution plan is already done by the promoters. Preparation of information memorandum is already done by the promoters. So two things which were taking most time in the normal CIRP is done beforehand. Therefore, the word is pre-pack. So you are basically packaging everything so that insolvency process is fast forwarded. Therefore, the total time period in normal CIRP, which was 180 days, in this practically it has been reduced to 90 days because much of the work is already done by the promoters. So it would be a conscious call, base resolution plan, preliminary information memorandum. Now, third one is, when would the insolvency commence? So insolvency commencement would be only when the NCLT gives an order that insolvency is commencing from today. But the call of filing an application would be taken within 90 days. So I'll come on to the steps, but broadly, if today board of director thinks that we should go for pre-pack insolvency, he will have to put it before shareholders, take a shareholders approval, and within 90 days from that time, he has to file an application. But legally speaking, strictly speaking, insolvency will commence only when the application gets admitted. So even if suppose I have filed an application in January, probably it might take 2 months, 3 months to admit the application because NCLT will hear the application, apply their mind, and then admit the application. After admission only, pre-pack insolvency commencement would start. So in short, we call it pre-pack ICD, pre-pack insolvency commencement date. So that is the date from which our timeline, our tickle of 90 days would start. So we have from pre-pack insolvency commencement date to finish all the steps of giving the base resolution plan, negotiating with the creditors committee, then publication of invitation for others to put in a bid, and closing the resolution plan. Everything has to be done within a span of only 90 days. In fact, interestingly, they have also fixed timeline for NCLT to pass an order. So by 90th day, he has to file an application before NCLT for approval by the RP, and NCLT has 30 days time to approve it. Normally in law, judicial authorities are never given such time, and here the time is given with a clause called shall. So NCLT shall pass an order within 30 days. In my personal opinion, Supreme Court has time and again said that judicial bodies' time cannot be fixed by enactment. Judicial bodies' time, if at all fixed by any enactment, will always be directory and not mandatory. Therefore, I think that probably this 30 days time will be directory, but yes, it is there in the law. So I think judges would also have to be very cautious while dealing with the applications of pre-pack insolvency. Now, another concept which comes in this particular scheme of pre-pack is pre-pack insolvency resolution process cost. Now, pre-pack insolvency resolution process cost, or I would say RPC, pre-pack resolution process cost, is nothing but all the expenditure which is incurred during this process will form part of the cost to be borne by company itself, the MSME itself. See, in normal insolvency, such type of cost is being incurred and borne by committee of creditors. If I put it in rude language, it would be borne by the bankers. But in case of pre-pack, it would be borne by the company itself, because here the application is filed by company itself. Therefore, all the cost is being borne by the company itself. Now, what could be the cost? Cost could be for running this process of 90 days plus 30 days, that is totally 120 days. If there is any funding required by the company, that will be interim finance. So that will be also a process cost, because tomorrow probably this process may not end into resolution. Probably this process may not end into termination. So in any which case, this cost is being borne by the company itself. Bankers will not go to pay this particular cost. Secondly, if there is any cost which is incurred by the resolution professional during this period of 120 days, again, this particular expense will form part of the insolvency resolution process cost. Any amount incurred by the RP for running the company is going to be the cost, and therefore this cost will be paid in priority by in addition to any other cost. So basically, if I say company is going to get liquidated, this cost will be in priority. So the I would say fee to be paid with the insolvency professional will be paid in priority. Cost incurred by the company will be paid in priority. Interim finance arranged by the MSME during this process will be paid in priority. So these three things would be paid in priority. Now, what would be the period's highest time or highest days in which this process will go on? So this process can end into one, termination of CIRP, second, liquidation of the corporate debtor, or third, transition or migration to CIRP. So all these three situations would end the insolvency resolution process period. What are these three situations? We will discuss in detail. Now, let us come on to who all can move an application for pre-pack insolvency. So it will be moved by the company itself. Here, no creditor can move the application. So if I am board of directors, I can take a conscious call and put it before shareholders for approval by special resolution in shareholders meeting. So I will have to call a general meeting and pass a resolution with 3/4 majority. Only then we can think of taking it under pre-pack insolvency. If it is an LLP, LLPs are also covered under MSME pre-pack. So if it is an LLP, again, majority, that is 3/4 of the partners will have to agree to take the company into pre-pack insolvency. However, let's say if there is a creditor, somebody has given goods or services to the company, his amount has not been paid by the company. Can that person file an insolvency? Answer is no. If it is pre-pack insolvency, creditors cannot file for insolvency. Promoters can only file for insolvency. So this is the basic difference. Normal insolvency could have been filed by a financial creditor, somebody who has given funding to the company, operational creditor who has given some goods or services to the company, and third, the company itself. Under pre-pack, it can only be initiated by company, not by financial creditor, not by operational creditor. So this is very important. Now, last definition is of fair value and liquidation value. So there are two types of valuation which are important under IB code. One is fair value and one is liquidation value. So fair value, I would put it, normally value which we will get in the market is fair value. So it will always be higher than the liquidation value. And in normal terms, liquidation value is similar to a distressed value of that particular asset. So this fair value and liquidation value will be of the corporate debtor. How this valuation is being done? Just to give you a brief background, under IB code, there are three class of assets, three asset class. One is land and building, one is plant and machinery, and one is financial assets and securities. So all three classes will have to be valued by two respective valuers. So in all, there would be 6 valuers. Then an average valuation will be taken of all these combining class, and that valuation will be of corporate debtor. So if I talk practically, the bankers would rely on this valuation for negotiation with the promoters. And if the promoters fail to convince, probably for third party bidders or third party buyers, this valuation will form benchmark. Now comes who would be eligible for filing under pre-pack insolvency. So first thing is it has to be an MSME. Now, as per MSME Act, it has to be registered under Section 7. So there are two types of MSMEs as of now. As per the recent notification, they have changed the definition from 1st July. So even those who were MSME pre-1st July are also eligible. Post 1st July, they are also eligible. So today, when the application is being filed, it should be either micro, small, or medium as per Section 7 of MSME Act. So even if it was not an MSME previously, or may not have been registered, or may not have been classified, but if today that particular entity is MSME, it can very well file an application for MSME. And this is very important aspect, because I have been seeing is a very big confusion in the market who would be an MSME. Defaults. Default means when can a company go for pre-pack MSME? So pre-pack MSME only if the default is, I'm telling you, very important, the default amount minimum has to be more than 10 lakh and maximum it could be 1 crore. So 10 lakh is the minimum amount, 1 crore is the highest amount. If there is a default more than 1 crore, then pre-pack insolvency will not be applicable. It would be normal CIRP. So a company, if it has more than 1 crore default, can go for suo motu insolvency under Section 10, under Section 10 of IB code. But if it is less than 1 crore, then pre-pack MSME provisions can be applied for reviving the company. Now, after these two criteria, the most important, and I would say the most difficult one to cross, is approval of financial creditors by a majority of 66%. So who all financial creditors would ultimately be on the driving seat during insolvency process? They would be those financial creditors who are unrelated. So if there is a related party to the company, that will not be eligible. Now, you must be wondering, who is a related party? So as per IB code, the related party is defined under Section 5. You can read the definition. It is vast definition, wider than Income Tax Act, wider than Companies Act. So related party will not be included in decision making or voting during the process. So that's the normal rule, that a related party is not permitted to vote, not permitted to participate. So even if I am a director and I have given money, I do not have voting rights. So I cannot become part of the financial creditors who are going to decide fate of the company. So unrelated financial creditors, they will have to take a call by a majority of 66% to actually file for pre-pack insolvency. So approval from unrelated financial creditors will have to be by 66% to file an application. Now, normally in my practical experience, MSME normally has 1 or 2 bankers in this range of maybe micro, small, medium. Highest we may go to medium. Probably they will have 2 bankers, or at the most 3 bankers. So he will have to, the promoter will have to manage 66% consent in favor to file an application under pre-pack insolvency. Another important thing, not only consent for filing, but also the consent for appointing X as insolvency professional. So who would be acting as an insolvency professional for this process? I would say, resolution professional, because insolvency professional is the qualification. He's called the resolution professional. So resolution professional who is going to be appointed will have to have a consent of 66% unrelated financial creditors. Now, though you all are aware, and probably this is being hosted by MSME committee, so I suppose everybody is aware about the importance and the revised criteria of MSME. But just for the sake of repetition, this is the revised classification. Previously, the classification of MSME was based on investment only. Now, there is a composite criteria of investment and turnover, and manufacturing and services are now counted as one only. So if there is an investment criteria and a turnover criteria together, then the company would classify under micro, small, or medium as per this latest bifurcation given by the Ministry of MSME. So I suppose we have a good amount of enterprise corporates which otherwise were not included under MSME, but as per the recent notification, they are included under MSME. Now, recently, they have also come out with the clarification, or I would say the notification clarifies that even the entities who are into trading business are covered under MSME. Previously, the issue was only a company which is into manufacturing or providing a service type of conditions, like they were giving service maybe to manufacturing company, or they are purely into service. Only those were covered, but a trading entity was unfortunately not covered. But in India, as we know, there's a huge supply chain and there are many traders also. So now they are also covered. So it's a good news that if we have a client who is a trading entity, may also take the benefit of pre-pack MSME. Though I have already told you about this notification, but in short, 10 lakh to 1 crore is the range in which an IBC pre-pack can be filed. FC's approval, again, I have already told you in detail, 66% of voting rights of unrelated financial creditors will have to be taken while filing for pre-pack insolvency. Now, point-wise, what would be the precondition for filing of pre-pack insolvency? So one is there has to be a declaration by the promoters that it is not done with an intention to defraud the creditors, though I think it's an implied declaration. But yes, there has to be a form which has to be filed. There has to be a special resolution. In case of a company, special resolution would be with the shareholders. 3/4 of the majority of shareholders will have to say yes for filing of pre-pack insolvency. Third one would be base resolution plan. This base resolution plan is again the basic price, or I had said you, the basic revised reserved price kind of a thing, which the promoters are ready to offer to the financial creditors. So base resolution plan has to be ready for filing of pre-pack insolvency. So declaration, form, consent, all these have to be in place, and this is all going informal. There is no formal timeline. There is no formal committee of creditors which is formed. So therefore, this is all informal outside the process. And this is very important. Outside the process, they are doing everything so that once the process gets started, it is done as quickly as 90 days. Now, I've already explained you what are related financial creditors, what are unrelated financial creditors. So I think that would be the same. In case there is no financial creditor in the company, if there is no financial creditor, probably there would be operational creditors in the company. So in that case, the voting rights would shift to operational creditors. And in that exceptional situation, the law says there would be 10 largest operational creditors who would be forming the committee of creditors. So now the COC would be of 10 largest operational creditors, one representative of workers, one representative of employees. So we call it 10-1-1 rule, basically, in case FCs are not there, or in case all the financial creditors are related party. Because in that case also, there would be no FCs in the committee. Then probably everybody would have heard about these cases of real estate. In the case of real estate, there was a peculiar situation whereby different category of home buyers could not be represented. So there could be a real estate company giving flats to 100 people. So 100 home buyers, they all are called financial creditors, but all 100 cannot be called in the meeting. Therefore, when there is a class of financial creditors, like one example is of home buyers, then the representative would be appointed to represent their interest in the COC, and they have fixed the fee for that person. However, whatever number of creditors that person is representing, the fee would be paid according to that. So now I am coming to another eligible conditions of pre-pack. So another eligible conditions for pre-pack would be there is no CIRP which has happened in the last 3 years. So let's say we are going under 2021, the company wants to go for pre-pack insolvency. So for the last 3 years, so 20, 19, 18, probably these 3 years, there should not be any insolvency which has happened and successfully concluded. So CIRP should not have been there. Another condition is pre-pack should not be there. So probably this clause will not apply today, but may apply in coming 3 years, that if there was already a pre-pack insolvency, already that pre-pack got concluded, then the company cannot re-go for pre-pack insolvency. Why this clause? What is the logic of this clause? In my view, the logic is if a company has already gone for insolvency, already revived, already financial creditors had given a haircut, then it cannot happen that again the insolvency is happening, again there is a haircut for the financial creditors. So to stop misuse of the law, they have put a cap of 3 years. Just like we also as a chartered accountant have a cooling period, that if you have been an statutory auditor, you have to give a cooling period. If you have been an internal auditor, give a cooling period. So something like that, they have tried to put it in this also. If a company is under CIRP, can the company go for pre-pack? Answer is no. If the company is undergoing CIRP, you do not have any right because a law has come. Therefore, you have to go for pre-pack. No, not permitted. If the insolvency process has been happening and the company eventually went under liquidation, can the promoters now apply for pre-pack? No. So if the company has been under insolvency, answer is no. It is undergoing CIRP? No. If it is under liquidation? No. So all these 3 situations, answer is no. Then the most tricky part and the most hurting part would be the section 29A. We have seen in past big corporates and big groups not being able to take over the company because they were disqualified under section 29 capital A. We all are aware, largest case which happened of a steel conglomerate, whereby the promoters tried hard, even harder at the end of the conclusion of bidding. They were ready to pay more than the successful bidder, but they were eventually disqualified under section 29A. So 29A is basically a disqualification for those who cannot buy the company. So now 29A is, though there are many clauses, we are not here to discuss 29A, but just for a passing reference, 29A means, let's say a person, a company and a promoter were disqualified by being declared as willful defaulter. So we all are aware when is willful defaulter happening, siphoning of funds, diversion of funds. So in such cases, those promoters on one hand being declared by bankers as willful defaulter cannot be permitted to buy back their own company or to buy another company. So if I am a defaulter in one company, I cannot go and buy another company, or if I am a defaulter, then I cannot buy back my own company under insolvency. So that is the logic of putting this section 29A, or I would say putting off this qualification under section 29A. Then IP who is going to be proposed in the application has to enjoy the trust and faith of 66% of FCs. Now there is another school of thought which says that insolvency professional has to be an independent. Just like we are an independent when we are an auditor, similarly, we have to be an independent when we are insolvency professional. So 66%, if they are agreeing on an IP, probably in my practical experience, I have seen bankers would try to have an insolvency professional who is there on their panel. So that is what the normal thinking is. So probably this is going to be a very tricky thing when you are going to get a proposal or a consent of FC being appointed under pre-pack. You will have to convince the bank or probably the financial creditors that yes, this is a good insolvency professional and he should be appointed, because bank would rather want some insolvency professional from their panel, because time and again this has been seen that they have more faith on somebody who is on their panel rather than somebody who is being put forth by the corporate debtor. So this is going to be a tricky thing, and therefore you would have to convince all the financial creditors at the time of filing of application. That is very important. The other two conditions I have already explained: 3/4 in case of shareholders special resolution, and in case of LLP 3/4 partners. So I think probably till this topic is cleared, there is anything, office bearers, if there are any query, I can take it, or otherwise we can move forward. I don't see any queries right now. So I think we would take the queries at the end. Okay. So what needs to be given by the majority? Majority will have to give a declaration that whatever pre-pack they are going to initiate, it is not with an intention to defraud anybody. The name which is proposed has been okayed by both of them, financial creditors and the company. Now, insolvency professional who is technically now proposed and not appointed will also have to give a report. So there is a format called P8, whereby in the report, he will have to say that this company is an MSME, number one. Number two, pre-pack insolvency, since they are initiating, it is not with an intention to defraud somebody, so that he's aware. And third, obviously, he will give an overall report that this case is fit for being admitted under pre-pack insolvency. Now, pre-pack insolvency IP, all the duties will get ceased when either the application gets admitted, because once it is admitted, now that person would become RP and discharge his duty altogether under sections of pre-pack IB code. If the application is rejected, again his duties get ceased. So this is how the insolvency professional will discharge his duties. Information memorandum, I have already explained you, it contains all the assets, all the liabilities, all the litigation details, or in short, I would say, just like in case of listed company, we have prospectus. In case of MSMEs, they have brought this concept of information memorandum, which gives out all the details. In short, it is encyclopedia for that CD, for the buyer to make an informed decision. That is very important. An informed decision be made on the basis of information memorandum. Now, plan has to be provided by the corporate debtor for the revival. Now, what is this plan? This plan is base resolution plan. So base resolution plan is the minimum offering being offered by the promoters in case this company is given back to them. So that is the basic resolution plan which is proposed by the promoters. So base resolution plan would become the benchmark for negotiation. So I will come back to base resolution plan in coming slide, where we would be discussing the dynamic bidding. So there are three things. One is a form has to be filled for pre-pack. I have already given you the declarations and the approvals which are required. Audited financial statements, provisional financial statements will have to be annexed to the form. 15,000 fee is there. You have to serve a copy to the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Board of India. So all this is standard. Important one here is PUF transactions declaration has to be given. Now, what is this PUF transactions? Probably those who are working in the field of insolvency would be aware. But for others who are not aware about PUF PUF transactions is 4 category of transactions. P means preferential transaction, U is undervalued transaction, F is fraudulent transaction, and E is extortionate credit transactions. Now, what do we mean by these transactions? So P means preferential transactions, means I have given preference to this particular creditor over other creditors because I want to do a fraud with other creditors. So if I am giving preference in payment to some creditor, so suppose I am having a sister concern, and instead of paying other outside creditors, I am giving payment to my sister concern. So though I have money, though I want to pay, but I want to favor somebody. So this is a preferential transactions, and mind it can be reversed by the NCLT. So preferential transactions are transactions which are not supposed to be entered by the company, and therefore preferential transactions can be reversed by the NCLT. So in normal CIRP, it was to be proved by the insolvency professional after seeing all the documentation that yes, this transaction is preferential and NCLT should order to restore back this transaction. And there is a Supreme Court judgment in the case of JP where 858 acres of land had been restored to the JP Infra from JP Associates, holding this transaction to be a preferential transaction. So this is the impact that the preferential transaction section is very important, and it can be a tricky situation if you declare preferential transaction. If the promoter declares that this is preferential transaction, probably it will also attract non-compliance under different laws, under Companies Act, under income tax law, maybe under GST law, that this transaction is wrong. Or let's say an example of undervalued transaction. Normally you are selling a particular commodity at 100 rupees and you are selling it at 80 rupees to maybe Mr. X, who is your relative, Mr. Y, who is your friend. So you are trying to sell some commodity lesser than the market value to defraud with the stakeholders or to cause loss to the company. So such transactions are called undervalued transaction, and they can also be reversed by the NCLT. So such type of transactions will have to be declared by the promoters and would have to be restored back to the company. Now, in my view, in my practical experience, these all transactions will have to be sanitized. I call it sanitized because if there is a balance sheet which is having XYZ transactions which are as per law not correct, then probably the promoters will have to take a call, sanitize the balance sheet, clean the balance sheet, and then go for pre-pack insolvency. Because even otherwise, if such transactions are being identified by the insolvency professional who is going to be appointed, then he will have to put these all transactions by way of an application to NCLT, and thereafter NCLT will direct the promoters to restore back these transactions. So it could be in kind, it could be in cash. Therefore, these transactions are going to be very tricky. And in my view, some people also criticize that this transaction declaration is a non-starter for pre-pack, but I do not support that view. My view is if there are such transactions, promoters should come forward and reverse those transactions and restore them to original. But if there are no such transactions, probably a forensic audit should be done before thinking of going under pre-pack and sanitize your books of accounts for taking this company under pre-pack. So therefore, before pre-pack, my suggestion is get a transaction auditor in place, get these PUF transactions identified, reversed or restored back to the corporate debtor, and then only file for insolvency. I don't think so that any person will say by way of a application that these were the transactions which were illegally done, and therefore I am declaring, and now please allow me to go for insolvency. I don't think that would be a good idea. The good idea would be to find out the transaction, reverse those transactions, and then take the company for pre-pack. Now, in pre-pack, there is some difference rather than normal CIRP. In case of normal insolvency, there was a publication being done in newspaper, on the website of the company, and also on the website of Insolvency Board of India, IBBI. Now, in this case, they have said that publication will be done on the website of the company and on the website of IBBI, but they do not say that it should be done in the newspaper. So here there is a more onus, or I would say a bigger duty on the promoters to give a perfect list of claims against the company, by the company and against the company, both. Because if the company is not giving a perfect claim list, what will happen tomorrow? Some creditor might go to NCLT and challenge the pre-pack process. So therefore, a list of claims will have to be prepared meticulously. Right or wrong, claim may be made by any creditor. Whether the company is accepting the view of the creditor or not, list has to have that claim. Third one is monitoring the affairs of the company. So in case of pre-pack, the monitoring is only to be done by the insolvency professional. Here, the insolvency professional does not indulge into day-to-day affairs of the company. He will not be a person who is going to sit in the company and do every operations. It will be continued to be done by the promoters. And therefore, as I said, under pre-pack, promoters enjoy a higher credibility. And therefore, the monitoring is only done. Otherwise, in normal CIRP, all the operations are being done with concurrence, instructions, and directions of IPs. So that is one part. Another part is, in case of pre-pack, information memorandum is not prepared by the insolvency professional, but it is submitted by the corporate debtor. So at the best, insolvency professional would be updating it, would be adding or subtracting based on maybe additional information which he gets after taking over the charge. But broadly, that is being completed by the corporate debtor, or I would say the directors or the promoters. Here again, the insolvency professional is given the duty to find out the transactions which were puff transactions, if at all he finds any such variance. So puff transaction I've already explained in detail. These transactions, if found and identified and determined by the IP, an appropriate application will have to be filed in the NCLT. And mind it, whether insolvency process gets terminated, whether the company goes under liquidation, whatever happens, these application will stand on its foot before the court. That is very clearly given in the pre-pack scheme. Resolution plan. The heart of the complete process is bringing a resolution plan. So resolution plan will be put before the COC, would be negotiated in the COC. And if the COC is of the view that they do not agree with the plan given by the promoters, they have an option to call for public invitation of resolution plan. So I'm going to come on to public invitation in detail quickly, but broadly speaking, the concept would conclude by either termination of the pre-pack, approval of the resolution plan, or migration to normal insolvency or CIRP. Now you can see on your screen, I've given a small timeline how this particular process goes through. My colleague has made this beautiful diagram on how this flow would happen. Public announcement has to be done within 2 days, but this has to be done only on the two websites, IBBI website and the website of the corporate debtor. However, they have given a leeway to the committee of creditors to find out another way. If they want, they can publish it also in the newspaper, but the law does not mandate to publish it in the newspaper. In case of normal CIRP, it was to be compulsory published in the local newspaper, to local newspaper. So that is missing here. And that I think probably as a best practice, committee of creditors should insist on publication in the registered office city, so that people be aware about all this. Then appointment of registered values. I've already discussed the concept of valuation. 2 registered valuers for each class: land, building, plant, machinery, financial assets. All those appointed, valuation done, committee being constituted. So the insolvency professional will call the committee of creditors for taking a call, submission of information memorandum, and the resolution plan, which is submitted with the base resolution plan given by the promoters. And if they think that no, this resolution plan is not okay, they might go for publication and calling for EOI of third parties to buy the company. Then finding of all those puff transactions, or technically we normally call these as avoidance transactions, forming an opinion, filing an application, approval of a resolution plan, maybe base resolution plan or some plan from the public, putting it before NCLT, and it only gives 30 days to NCLT to conclude the process. So this is a broad timeline which has to be followed as per the law. So 120 days, we start and end in the pre-pen. Now let us examine each particular process, how it happens, each particular step in the process, how it happens. So first, RP duty is to see whether all the claims are being matching with the books of accounts. If he thinks that there is some issue with regard to some claim, he can very well communicate with the claimant and find out exact claim, inform the creditors that this is your claim. If there is any dispute, he can accordingly and appropriately word it in the information memorandum. He would obviously monitor the progress of the management of affairs by the promoter. He would maintain an updated list of the claim, update the information memorandum, and for the puff transactions, he would be taking care whether he should appoint a transaction auditor or forensic auditor, we popularly call, for finding out such transactions and making an appropriate application before NCLT. So it's a mandatory duty. And I tell you, courts are taking this as a very, very serious issue. If the transaction audit is not done, or if it is done, an application is not filed, courts are coming down heavily on the insolvency professional. So that is very important that we have to have forensic auditor in place and have an independent view of the things. Now, there are some powers of insolvency professional which may or may not be exercised by the IP. So some of them are, he would be having an access to the books of corporate debtor, all the electronic records, all the records maintained with the government, but that does not mean he has to compulsory do it. So that is something, a liberty given to him. He may do it, may not do it, seeing to the circumstances, may take a call. Here, the powers of board of director are not suspended like normal CIRP. Therefore, he would be attending the meeting of board of directors. Each meeting, he has a right, he has a power to go and attend it. But in my view, the best practice would be board of directors should call resolution professional as a permanent invitee in the meetings, so that there is a free flow of information and there is a transparency being maintained during the process of insolvency. Then appointment of any auditors, accountants, supporting professionals, lawyers, all these things. During pre-pack, he has all the powers, rights. Whoever he appoints, the expense will have to be borne by the company itself. So therefore, this is very important. Valuation, though I have already discussed, one important aspect I would just like to reiterate here, that the valuation is being done on each class. Average valuation is taken out, and this valuation basically forms the basis of opinion for the committee to decide X plan or Y plan, as the case may be. Information memorandum, normally it will include all these details. So financial statements, provisional financial statements, latest, last 2 years, all assets, liability, whoever have given the guarantees for the company, litigation against the company, by the company, all these details will become part of the information memorandum. Now, invitation for resolution plan will only be given if the committee of creditors are having two views. One, the base resolution plan is not paying operational creditors in full. So in normal CIRP, operational creditors were not required to be paid in full. They would be getting anything which they would be getting during the waterfall. So under waterfall, operational creditors rank mostly in the last. The major revenue or major payout we have seen historically during this IB code has been to financial creditors, workers, employees. Financial creditors both secured, unsecured. But normally operational creditors were getting less or maybe in some cases, in big ticket size cases, nil. In this particular pre-pack, what they have done is, since the creditors cannot initiate the pre-pack, they have protected the operational creditors. So they say if there is a base resolution plan and the total payment is not made to the operational creditors, if there is any impairment of payment to operational creditors, then in that case, base resolution plan will not be accepted by the COC, and therefore there would be a publication for invitation by the insolvency professional, calling or inviting people at large to give their resolution plan. Now here there is a very important catch or interpretation. They are giving publication in the newspaper calling for plans, but this does not mean that the base resolution plan which was given and wherein the 100% payment is not made to the operational creditors may not get selected. So there could be a situation where there is a base resolution plan, publication in the invitation for public to come and give their plans, but base resolution plan ultimately gets selected. So there could be a situation like this also. Law is protecting them at the primary stage, but at the final stage, it will be market driven only. So this is a very important interpretation, that operational creditor may or may not get full payment under a pre-pack insolvency also, even if the promoters are going to purchase the company successfully from committee of creditors. So this is a very important interpretation of mine in this particular instance when the OCs are not paid in full. Now, RP, while publication and inviting resolution plan from public, so mind it, from public, not from promoters. This promoter had already given the base resolution plan. He will have to give the details, what all is required, and he cannot ask for a non-refundable deposit. So it has to be a refundable deposit. It can be having some parameters like what would be the basis of evaluation. So there could be parameters like cash component, upfront payment, deferred payment, debentures, equity, whatever way they want to put it for the evaluation purpose. Normally, they assign some weights for each type of payments. Second, what would be the basis for considering the resolution plan? So there could be some basis that we want so much amount in cash. When I'm saying cash, that means cash and bank, but it means that the hard liquid is going to be paid to the COC. Then there would be a tick size. So tick size is very important. What is tick size? Let's say somebody is giving a plan of 100 rupees. Another person is giving a plan of 105 rupees, but the tick size is 10. So the COC will only accept a higher resolution plan from 100 if the tick size of 10 is trigged. So that means 110 has to be the next plan to be approved. They will not take anything from 101 till 109. So basically a tick size is a multiple whereby a considerable or a significant resolution plan, which is better than the base plan, is negotiated. So you think it like this: base resolution plan is of 100 rupees, tick size is of 10 rupees. So another plan which would be acceptable to COC would be of 110 or 120 or 130. So that is how this particular plans would be negotiated. So this is what the tick size is, that the plan is negotiated by a multiple, and that is the tick size. These all things would be there for the resolution plan. I think all the participants can read it at leisure, because I'm going to share this PPT. But broadly speaking, the resolution plan will have clearly a declaration by the promoters, they are not disqualified, who would be managing the affairs of the company, how the supervision of the resolution plan will take place, what would be the payment made to the financial creditors, whether it is a reschedulement or a waiver or a restructuring or a debt converted partly into equity, partly into debt. All those situations will be engulfed in this particular resolution plan. Merger and amalgamation can also take place through this resolution plan structure. M&A is possible, and probably M&A activity in MSME would increase because it is permitted as a part of resolution plan. There could be also a demerger. So suppose an MSME has two kinds of business. So a resolution plan may say that it should be demerged into another entity. And as you are all aware that under resolution plan, appropriately Income Tax Act has been amended and Income Tax Department has to be made a party and carry forward of losses is possible. So therefore, all these situations would be there in the resolution plan, which would be accepted by the authorities because resolution plan once approved is binding on all. All means all the creditors, stakeholders, guarantors, government, anybody. So that is the power of resolution plan. So any curing, waiving of financial debt can be done through the resolution plan. So I suppose this concept of resolution plan is clear. In fact, it can also happen that I take a loss-making MSME during this insolvency resolution process, and I may merge it into my profit-making entity. So I am a buyer, I am a profit-making company, I may merge a loss-making company into mine and enjoy the benefit of losses. There could be a situation like this. So basically, it's a tax planning way also, whereby the absorption of losses might take place. Obviously, you will have to consult a tax expert whether those line of businesses are same and all. But yes, broadly speaking, it can be done. Now, important, and I would say a default rule, or I would say a exceptional provision is there, whereby they say that if during the process of pre-pack insolvency, that is this 120 days, I would say 90 days, in 90 days, if the committee of creditors thinks that there is some problem where they are aware that this process has been done to defraud some creditors, or during the process, the management is trying to mismanage the affairs of the company. In that case, they can, by 66% majority, they can resolve that the management of the corporate debtor will no longer continue with the management, the suspended board of the board of directors, and it will go to the resolution professional. And resolution professional will have to make an application to NCLT for getting this vesting of management of the company into it. So basically, IP would have the same powers normally, which is there under CIRP. Complete management control will come to him, but it will be only in the case where there is a apprehension of mismanagement or there is some fraudulent activity which has come to the knowledge of COC. It can be done by COC consent, and on the COC's consent of 66%, application would be filed by the resolution professional. Now, once the management comes to the resolution professional, all duties which are normally exercised under CIRP will be exercised by the RP. So complete moratorium will apply. So moratorium, though you are all aware, just for the sake of repetition, moratorium is the process, the calm period which the process enjoys when there is no litigation against the company, no fresh litigation starts, or if there is a pending litigation, it will not proceed. If the company is, let's say, sitting in a rented premises, the landlord will not be able to vacate those premises because there is a moratorium. So moratorium basically gives a calm, a cool period for the company to revive rather than engaging itself in litigation filed by the maybe other persons against the company. Now, these moratorium under pre-pack also applies, but essential goods and services which otherwise were disconnected under, which otherwise could have been disconnected, they were protected under CIRP. But in pre-pack, they say that those payments will have to be done. And if the payment is not done by the MSME, those services of goods or maybe purely IT services, maybe water service, electricity service, they can be disconnected. So that particular clause of moratorium, which is otherwise protecting the MSME, but it makes out an exception, it will not help if you are not paying these services. Now that particular protection will also come if the management goes away from the board of directors, meaning thereby the COC has lost its faith in the management and therefore they are asking for a complete moratorium. Otherwise, in normal situation, moratorium is enjoyed for the litigation, but not with respect to payment of goods and services during pre-pack. So I'm just skipping going more into detail of moratorium because that's another topic. Now, and let us understand the heart of this particular negotiation. So what happens in this base resolution plan is corporate debtor gives a base resolution plan to RP within 2 days of the initiation. This resolution plan, if it is not paying all operational creditors, as I told, if there is a impairment in payment to operational creditors, or if the COC does not approve base resolution plan, in both these two situations, RP is duty bound to invite public invitation for calling base resolution plan from the third parties. So third parties will now come and give their resolution plan. Now let's say third party has come and given a resolution plan of 105 rupees. Base resolution plan given by the promoter was of 100 rupees. Now the tick size, as I explained the tick size, it is of 10 rupees. So they will ask the third party to give at least 110 resolution plan so that it succeeds. Now, once it is given 110, again a chance will be given to the promoter to match that 110. So that is what we normally call right of first refusal is given to the promoters, or promoters are given a chance to match the price. So they might match the price to 110. Probably now the price could be increased to 120 by the third party, and again a chance to the directors to increase it to 120. Now this will go on and on, but the timeline is 48 hours. So in 48 hours, this has to be concluded and finalized who will win. Now, I think it would be a very big challenge for the bankers to decide within 48 hours, because as we know, the typical system of working in banks, it goes from X authority to Y and Y to Z, and then it goes for approvals from head office and all. I think it would be a challenge to approve it within 48 hours, but as it may be, in 48 hours, a plan has to be approved with 66% majority, and then that plan will be put up before NCLT for accepting. Now, this plan may be accepted by the NCLT, may be rejected by NCLT. NCLT can reject it if it thinks that there are some issues in the plan which is not in accordance with law. They might reject it also, and they might terminate the resolution process if they think that the plan is not worth accepting. If the plan is approved, obviously the process gets terminated. So these are the basic counters of how the resolution plan, dynamic pricing and everything happens. Now, the next important part is of imposing penalty. Now, what is the penalty which can be imposed if somebody is trying to play with this process? So if somebody is trying to defraud, has filed the application with an intention to do some fraud, then that person, the corporate debtor, would be penalized with a penalty ranging from 1 lakh to 1 crore. So there could be a heavy penalty, and that is very important that the person should not try to play with this MSME pre-pack, because it is ultimately for revival and it should not be with an intention to do fraud with somebody. Secondly, if during the process, the directors, because they are enjoying the trust and they try to do some defraud or try to arrange the affairs in a way to defraud with other creditors, again, the same penalty could be imposed on the promoters of the corporate debtor. So a huge and a heavy penalty can be imposed, and therefore it has to be very cautiously treated during the process. Now, termination of pre-pack. So when the process would be terminated, if the approval of plan does not happen within those 90 days, if the rejection takes place of the resolution plan, whether by the promoter or by third party, is not acceptable to the COC, or NCLT rejects the plan, maybe on grounds that it does not comply with the law, or COC themselves decides that we should terminate the process of pre-pack. So it could be a situation where COC deems fit that no, now the process should not be carried forward, so we should terminate it. Or COC thinks that this is a fit case for CIRP. So they can also get this pre-pack migrated to corporate insolvency resolution process. So that normal CIRP might get started. However, there is a rider. The company should be eligible at that point of time to go under CIRP. So that is very important, that there could be a situation for termination by COC also, where NCLT had ordered because of some defrauding or mismanagement being done by the management, then NCLT, if had taken a view that the management would now continue with the RP, in that particular case, if COC has gone ahead and accepted the resolution plan whereby the same management is continuing, then the view is, the law thinks that the view should be taken to terminate the insolvency. So that means if there is an erring promoter, if there is a defaulting promoter, NCLT has come to the knowledge, given the charge to the resolution professional, and asked promoters not to do the management. Even then, if COC is doing a collusive activity with the promoters, then that plan should not be approved and there should be a termination of pre-pack process. So there is a check and balance being embedded in the code. So that is very important. Now, there could be a situation where a liquidation is ordered. Now, see, there is a very important issue. COC can never ever decide for liquidation. They can only ask for termination or they can ask for migration to CIRP. In CIRP, COC had the power to take the company into liquidation. But under pre-pack, they do not have power to take the company into liquidation. So the first case is if NCLT thinks that the plan which was approved by the COC is not correct, or the plan which was approved by NCLT has not been implemented. Or third, where the management is again going back to the same promoters who were actually defrauding the process. So in these three situations, liquidation would be done. Now, this is very interesting that normal pre-pack can be converted into CIRP. So COC can anytime, with the approval of 66% unrelated FCs, of course, think that the process of pre-pack is not correct and it should go to CIRP, they can definitely take a call to take the company into CIRP. Now, once they take a call, obviously the RP will have to file an application with the NCLT. And I'm saying AA, it means adjudicating authority. In this case, it is NCLT. Appoint the same person as a resolution professional for CIRP. They can ask the RP to give consent if he wants to act. If he does not want to act in the CIRP, they can appoint anybody else, ask for IBBI or a panel maintained by them to appoint somebody. And whatever the cost has been incurred during pre-pack, that complete cost will become part of CIRP during the process of CIRP. So basically the pre-pack process was there for 90 days, 30 days for the approval. So in 90 days, if nothing could succeed, they could have very well taken a call and migrated this process into CIRP. So now the fresh lease of process would start, and the law says it will be assumed that it is a normal insolvency filed by the financial creditors, because you see financial creditors are there in COC and they are taking a call by 66% to take the company into normal CIRP. So therefore, Section 7 is deemed to be initiated. So this is very, very important, that a process of pre-pack can also give rise to a process under CIRP. So this is all with regard to migration from pre-pack to CIRP. So I think this has brought us to the end of my presentation, and I think I have tried to be on time. If there are any queries, I would love to answer. I hope office bearers, anybody who is there. Yes, Yogesh ji, I can see you. So if there are queries, I think on Yogesh ji, Nilasha ji, anybody, you can post the queries. I would be happy to answer them. Yogesh ji, are you able to hear me?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I call to Dheeraj ji. Sir, I think किसी की query है नहीं. So we are going to further proceed for formal vote of thanks.
Okay.
So first of all, we are thankful to the Chairman Committee of MSME CA Dheeraj Khandelwal ji and Vice Chairman CA Pramod Jain sir for organizing such a wonderful webinar today. And we are also thankful to the guest speaker of today's program, CA Advocate Nipun Singhvi ji, for such a wonderful and powerful deliberation. Thank you so much, sir. And we are especially thankful to all the audience of today's webinar, जिनकी वजह से प्रोग्राम सक्सेसफुल हो पाया. तो सभी को बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद. And very good day. Thank you all.
हेलो सर.
निलाशा जी, कोई क्वेरी है?
हाँ, एक क्वेश्चन आया है
एक
सर.
क्वेश्चन आया है सर. जी
Please.
1 minute, sir. Sir, Act Section 29A is not on card for MSME. Whether a promoter-driven based resolution plan during PIRP may contain for extinguishment of liabilities of personal guarantors under guarantee given by promoters to MSME corporates. Also, what would be the position, view of adjudicating authority to admit such situation or not considering PGDRT mechanism, which has already been notified?
Okay, so it's a very good question. In fact, I will take some situations where I can answer this query. See, 29A is a disqualification section which says who all are ineligible to go for insolvency process. As such, they are not eligible to file for reviving their own company. So if somebody is 29A disqualified, let's say we have seen the biggest case of Essar Steel, where the promoters were not eligible to buy their own company even when they were having money. So basically, it's a penal provision whereby somebody is prohibited from buying its own company. Now, in case of MSME, 29A has been relaxed for two specific provisions. That is, with regard to 12 months or more, there is an NPA. Then it is not strictly followed. It is relaxed. But if, let's say, the MSME promoters are declared as willful defaulter as per RBI circular, they will not be able to buy their own company. So in that case, it is not advisable to go for pre-pack, even otherwise. First, to contest, if you are wrongly declared as willful defaulter, you can get a court order, stay order on willful defaulter. So that is one. If the promoters are not convicted, they have not done any offense, then they are not disqualified under 29A. They can very well buy it out. As far as personal guarantee is concerned, Supreme Court has very clearly laid down in recently Lalit Kumar Jain versus Union of India judgment that personal guarantee can be invoked by the bankers even if there is insolvency of the company. But here the logic under pre-pack insolvency is promoters and bankers are sitting together on the same table and trying to work out a solution. So if they are working out a solution, let's say for 100 rupees debt, they are going to settle at 80 rupees. In my view, nobody is going to press for that 20 rupees deficit personally on the promoters, because they are ultimately going to waive it. It cannot be that on the one hand, they are allowing your pre-pack insolvency, and on the other hand, they are going for your personal insolvency. I don't think that would be a good proposition. And in fact, I think more than a month back, we had a similar type of a roundtable conference with the Deputy MD, Mr. Sally of SBI, and he was sharing his views on pre-pack insolvency. He said that we are very positively looking at pre-pack. They have already given their guidelines, and they are not going to go behind the promoters under personal insolvency if the company is getting resolved and getting back on its toes to work. And ultimately, the logic of MSME pre-pack is to make the company stand again. So I don't think so that on one hand, you are going to stand back the company, and on the other hand, you are going to go for a kill against the promoter. So that I don't think so that could be practically done. And it would be a resolution for both promoters as well as the company.
Okay, sir. Thank you. Next question भी आया है. If borrower is Mudra loan recipient, maximum loan of 10 lakhs, affected by loss of business due to COVID-19, are any option available to him at the present to resolve overdue situation? It is understood pre-pack insolvency process is not available due to loan size being less than rupees 1 crore.
See, pre-pack is available for a loan default of 10 lakh to 1 crore. So if that range is there and the borrower is a company or an LLP, you are having this option of pre-pack insolvency. If the SSC is not a company, probably you will have to go and explore something on the one-time settlement side. As per the RBI master circular on stressed assets, something might come on. But if it is a corporate, and if the range default is from 10 lakh to 1 crore, I suggest that pre-pack is a very good option, and they will definitely consider your case, even if it is a Mudra loan. It does not matter that the creditor is having any security or if it is an unsecured loan. Ultimately, the creditor is a financial creditor.
Sir, if he is not a corporator, then?
So as of now, IB code provisions are only applicable to corporate MSMEs. That is why I said that our committee should take a call and press that non-corporates also, the provision should be notified. See, provisions are there, but they are till date not notified. So it would be better if that gets notified.
Okay. One more question. As you have started that partnership, your partnership and individuals are not eligible for pre-pack liquidation, then whether LLP is eligible for the process?
Yes, LLP as of now, they have notified. LLP and any company under Companies Act, whether it is a private limited or a public limited, small, big, all companies are covered.
Okay. What options are available to Mudra loan defaulter to resolve the default with lenders?
As I told, if the borrower is a company, then I suggest going for pre-pack MSME. If it is not a corporate, then obviously it will have to be OTS. One-time settlement, something like that would have to be worked upon. Otherwise, someday we can also keep the SARFAESI and RDDB Act, because that is the two options under which a settlement can be done through court process. It is through DRT. Both the laws are with respect to DRT, and it will not come to NCLT.
Okay. A person is a common director in two companies and one of that company goes into PIRP. Will it affect other company?
No, as such, there is no condition whereby other companies might come. So there is absolutely no problem.
Okay. Last question, sir. What are various opportunities for chartered accountant in pre-pack resolution plan, whether they are not qualified as insolvency professionals?
See, as of now, insolvency professional for being an IP, we all chartered accountants, company secretaries, CWA, advocates, all are permitted. They need to pass an exam. Minimum eligibility is 10 years of experience. It does not matter whether it is into practice or into job, but at the date of giving exam, you should have a practicing certificate. So definitely you can become an IP, and then you can take up this pre-pack insolvency cases. However, if you do not want to become an IP, you can obviously get an IP on board and advise the complete process. because advising the process, you need not be an IP. Only to run the process, you need to be an insolvency professional. And as I tell you, more than around 3,000 IPs have been there, and more than 60% are from ICAI. So our members are always into dominance in whatever area they go. So therefore, I suggest that people should think of IP. And in fact, our institute has also launched the IP certification course. I am also a faculty in that course. I suggest everybody to do the course and then formally give the exam. And many of the chartered accountants in last 5 years, I have seen shifted from traditional practice to insolvency practice. So it's a very booming area. And for next 5 years, I think it is going to be a big area, just like GST. It is going to be an upcoming area.
Okay, sir, it's done. Thank you for your wonderful interaction and deliberation on pre-packaged insolvency for MSME. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Nilasha ji. Thank you, Yogesh ji. And thank you, committee of MSME, for calling me. Hope it was an interactive session. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Sandeep ji. Thank you, Sol ji.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Yogesh bhai, Nilesh ma'am. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.